나도 아주게다 주변 공부지도 뒤에서당 냠네 단 어로 저위게 체로 시간을 남나 태바치 중요 간의 시민이야 안정하게 냠는 제제 태바치 미취 강도 강인배나 탈도 산지고 고방 투비치 송바 지바레 선비게 노신에 내섬 데니게 개반이 투바지다 데니게 개반이 비토네 내랑기 취 제세 가르체비나 지 차상의 지게 다시 말이 비기 님보도 바지 중앙이나 이거서 우리 다디네 저기 로 태바치 비기 취 로정지 비기다 된다데 로정의 치 종위 체라나 종위 다래나 모두 세세 그게 참 아주 태바치 비기 기신 로정고 냠는 제제 태바치 중기 최근의 시민의 탈도 상교고만 특히 송바레세디 인바디 내바니바체 되는 내바니 베트는 소소라는 게 최념의 제바디 다지 말이 베님보 조투바지요 중국에바나 근데 아까 소리 태바치 로정지 비기 다래 체래 돈다지 로정 비기 냠는 제비게다 야부용 비기 좀 다리 뒤에서 오다.
Good afternoon. So this morning we concluded looking at presenting a summary of a lifetime's practice, in particular the how to practice at the time of death and sleep. And then we started to look at the measure of having trained the mind. We looked at the first point, that all teachings come down to a single purpose. And this is where one understands that, truly recognizes that all the teachings from the Buddha are focused on the achievement of the purpose of the ending of being suffering, liberation from suffering. And where one actually comes to recognize this is when oneself is striving in recognizing that all that appears to one's mind is empty of inherent existence and is striving to abandon the ignorance of self-grasping.
근데 다시 말이거든 님보 조수고 말이가서 차단기야래 제거로와 지상 최셔바디 멤버체 다시 말이비 님보 조수바시 오래서지 간질도 나라 최가리나다 다시 녀모바 저기 동아당 데니가 규조와 다시 말이버래 다시 말이버 빵고도 니 빵아야 된다 양의 기술 냠네 지규세베다 도시의 기술 제들이 다 빼는 것도 개화 가르치비나 또 공부做的 다시 말이 받다면도 비셔라 공부하래 다디 공부 되네 아직 튼삼다 되네게 내가 마고 몇갑라 나지 기회 삼다데 개화 지차사와 주어부와 달아서 받아 개화 가르치비네 다시 말 받을 방법도 뒷방배도 나려야다 이직 냠는 지어디 냠는 제발에 탈심을 해야 된다라 기술 두기에서 삼다면은 되네게 차사와 담 고아고아 같이 최고프기 개와 차사 다시 말이비 님벌 두고로 받아 디스도 나디서 되네시고 거래서 나 다시 말이바 뻥비 치르도 아니 탈도 산요고 봐 투비시 디쳐다는 개념의 지위에서 삼도 당고 그래서지.
Implicit meaning is that one needs to abandon afflicted minds such as I am a Mahayanist, others are not. Or I'm engaging in the training of the Mahayana with a wish of wanting to be known as a practitioner of the Buddha Dharma, a practitioner of the Mahayana. Because when one has such a tainted motivation, this clearly impedes the abandonment of the ignorance of self-grasping, because one is acting under the influence of the afflictions. So the person who has come to recognize this first point, they are striving to abandon the ignorance of self-grasping, and as part of that, they recognize that all the teachings of the Buddha are focused on the abandonment of ignorance, or rather, on the abandonment of suffering through the eradication of ignorance, through the attainment of wisdom. And this person, thereby, is not just a mere intellectual understanding. All they are doing is done so as to abandon ignorance. For example, when they engage in their various virtuous activities, from activities such as prostrations or making offerings, the motivation is, through this merit, may it aid my realization of wisdom so that I can attain the final state of Buddhahood. Now, turning to the second subpoint within the measure of having trained the mind, rely on the two witnesses of foremost importance. So the two witnesses are oneself, and the first witness is oneself, the second witness is others.
이제는 요거 군나 꾸마 여여 말고 고구야 제 야보레스는 제는 이 방보샤르와 신 미생기 방보샤르와 나 소소라랑기 꾸마 점메바 소소기 직방다다 소소기 댕서여반다 소소기 꾸마 점메 삼바데 랑기 방보르와 제사데 소소기 꾸마 마제바데 랑기 방 랑기 엉아 제메세 댕서여바데 랑기 방보 미sen다 오고 꾸마 여여 말고 디네레세 여여 말 셰베데 신기 방보샤르 꾸마 마인비 So
to explain the oneself as a witness, others as a witness, just imagine one is accused of, say, stealing. So you've now been accused of stealing, but someone else says, no, you're not a thief. I saw them, they were not stealing. So someone else was a witness to your conduct and can assert that you were not a thief. And so that's in relation to others as witness. Oneself as a witness would be, you yourself know you did not do what you have been falsely accused of.
미션다기 오다고 나년 두면서 미션다 바라도 오고 나년 요 말에서 양직 지행 연구로 하되 연구로 하되 미션이 봉보로 하다 아주 직 나년지 좀 외다 메세 팀강도 왜나 다랑기 나니 메비 김세시 소속에 대한세 예바지다 미션다기 오다고 나년 요 말에서 비기데 라건 좀 봤는데 봉보로 하다 디데 랑기 봉보신이 봉보세 뒤로와.
Imagine this very clearly in a court of law, where what you have been accused, and you stand up and say, I did not do so. Someone else then comes and talks on your behalf and says, no, they definitely did not do so. So in this way, oneself acts as a witness, someone else acts as a witness.
냠렌지데 야보지 냠린데 야보 중다 마중세디 다 미생기 때나 안데지게 어느 균매바 통외나 안 통거바지다 랑기네 삼단의 균매바지 고고래 제사데 생기 봉보시데 당은 저 생기 가르 통월스는 소수게 냠렌지네 미디 냠렌베지 야보도 미두세디 통외디 아니 미 그런 게 넘기네 류마게 류기 죄바다 야보다 지 안데 지가게 죄바 야보 류마 죄바 야보 시신도 지유바나 미지게 가서 오다고 미 죄바 냠레 야보 지유도 세메 삼로 중구로와 어디 안제사디 나데네 주바이나 미신이 오다고네 거미 냠레제 빼미 야보레셔 거 냠레 야보레 세메 삼로 주면은 다시 미가 동물세는 그주 치류기 류마게 죄바 시신도의 통진은 어다고 죄번 냠렘바 야보레다 세베 삼 지시 미데네라고 요나다디 생기 봉보세되지 그런 냠렘 제바디 미산다게 봉보로 차로 미 어다고 냠렘지 야고 지거를 진 이거는 그 때도 통해다 치료용하게 시신도의 통진 어다 그 냠네 제비다 되네 야고도 와서면 좀 지금 미 되네 시에도 다디 방보셔야 돼 현지 방보셔야 최고래.
So, in our context then, the witness of oneself and the witness of others. So the witness of others, perhaps we'd know best as someone who's a character witness, in that someone other than yourself would assert that your behavior, your verbal and physical behavior is excellent. It's in accordance with the Dharma. So in this way, others can observe that, can attest to your behavior, physical and verbal behavior, being in accordance with the Dharma.
rangi pongpo se sosuge nyamlin je sosuge da sosuge samlun ta je nyamlin cheba di ngi de nyamlin cheba di abo chungdu min de samta de sosuge nyamlin cheba da tisha de ngi nyamlin de mano wa da ma chu ba de je sha de ni ge mu de je pe ya wo chung sha san be sosuge da sosuge du shenes sosuge lo su ni be thon da sosuge du shenes sosuge de ngi nyamlin cheba de 난 굴롱 간에 chung sha di di kare che de ni chung sha du 심 ju che de ni ge an chi ge 냠는 된마 중나 셰바나 소소 냠는 제바데 소소 삼든 소중해바데 진이 제가 소소 아구루와 지단 되네게 소소 어딘게 야부 중샤 선배 선배나 다디 랑기 봉보차래 제가 되네 자다 되네게 냠네 소수기 냠는 제다 마제 야부 중다 마셔서데 미생이 단 때문에 소수 융하게 제베 예 야부치 통제 미생이 야부도下다 소수게 삼당베네 안주도시 바저 어딘이 지샤데 냠는 지샤다 지샤 노르 야부충샤 선배 삼 중베나 되네 안에 봉봉이 조어지 소수게 다 대화침 로션게 냠는 제바디 딕도여레다 냠는 제네 진난 나 집에 새로지 되는 중고래시.
And then oneself as a witness refers to one being aware of one's own mind and thereby honestly assessing the quality of one's motivation, in particular, whether you are practicing in accordance with the guidance you've received. So these two come together in that the way you interact with others needs to be in accordance with the Dharma, but not as a mere display. Not as just when one is in front of others or one is acting the way people expect of you, but that this is being done sincerely from your heart. So in this way, a sign or a measure of having trained the mind is in terms of how you're interacting with others, as well as the motivation behind how you interact with others.
나 저기 치 저바 시신 두어 용하디 가래 용어서는 난기 냠네 답변의 잠니 제 자주 셈다 되니기 동만이 또 벌어서 되게 냠는 제 냠는 야고 여바 있나 난기 안 직선이야 제 인슈 때문에 수준 송야라서 받아 되니기 냠는 야고 여바 있나 치 류하게 넘겨야 야고 중 류기 예 치유류 아니 시주도 어디 온 거래 그래서 치유류기 넘겨대 가래 유매세데 맞아 나로 낭 셈라라데 거라데 삼류기 삼방안바다 주부의 삼르제다 치 넘겨대야 인간바치 안디 안자와대 인간바치 내용 거로 난 나로 삼로야 아니 전리야 체와 방비게 중외 셈바 아니 전리야 판배 셈바 전바다 제외 삼로 주바나 대 류하게 넘겨대야 야바치 어제 전리야 지금 律习性多的过，就是律习性律不对的，做律啊的习性多用那么样的，能生习性多因那原本那第一件律习性多的用过嘞，能生习性嘛多进那，那习话现在生习话，现在那边上班7月上班没吧，今天说出去现在偏偏7月上班就那生习话的话的，就是那那个习话，那多啊现在那边确实马东话，送月上班原本那多啊的话。제가 되니게 삼로 쉬바네 류하게 줘봐 도와줘 거래서 제가 삼로 나래 모두 셈 마도 와샤나 네베 삼바다 세베 삼바다 되니게 견제 샤바 셴에 두신의 삼로 쉬바네 류하 줘봐디야네 지게 두부로다 셴에 진내외에 용 거래서 제가 되니게 나네 두시 용 거래서 제가 치류 시신 도와용한데 낭셈 도와주고 거래 되니 엄마네 고거래서 도와줘 용 거래서
The focus of Buddhist practice is on transforming the mind. As one transforms one's mind, the expressions of one's mind also change. Expressions of your mind refer to how you engage with others, how you speak to them and about them, as well as how you act towards others and around others. It's through transforming one's mind that one's physical and verbal conduct transforms. Whereas one is living within the restraints of what is ethical, one's mind starts to subdue. And as one's ethics gets ever more influenced by one's cultivation of bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, one's mind greatly subdues. And as one's mind becomes more peaceful, more subdued, so too does one's behavior, one's verbal and physical behavior. If one's mind is not subdued, to an extent, one can act and speak in a certain way before others, but this will just be a pretense, and it cannot be consistent, especially when facing slightly challenging circumstances. So therefore, the outer witness bears witness to the resultant behavior that follows from what the inner witness recognizes is happening, namely the mind, through the training in ethics, bodhicitta, wisdom, and so forth. The mind is becoming ever more peaceful, ever more subdued. In other words, not responding to what arises in the mind like before, but being subdued, peaceful. And this then imbues one's speech and physical behavior.
and the Yamne Sharamene, Chilo Yabe, Yamne Yawashui, Jin Dodo, Jen, Jishin into Shada, then a kind of into share the Lugin, the Muawood, the Yungor, Jizada, Dine Tony, and Anzushan, Anzu Tondugala, Kui Samonala, Kariuba, Jingi, Shara Kalakawa, Topigin, Yamlin, Tobag, some Kariuba, Shirahu, Mare, Chi Numu, Lunga, Numu, Dikari, but Yahu. Jizanda Chi Lunga, and Numu, Yawi, Towen. I would go Yamne shoot Topo instead somebody in being ever in never sky on Marati, that Jidani, she should do a Toyaboris Mato, Shen, so Mares or that.
So reading the second point, rely on the two witnesses of foremost importance. We need to rely on the two two witnesses, but of these two, which are both important, one is foremost, and that will be the inner witness or the self-witness. Because it's only the individual who can know their own mind. Others can make superimpositions based upon their way of behaving and the way of speaking. And those superimpositions, or those presumptions are all too often based on brief interactions, but sometimes they are based on on knowing someone a longer period, seeing them in a variety of circumstances. But nevertheless, others can only make presumptions on how they assume one's mind is. It's only oneself that, through the process of meditation, can see whether the mind is transforming or not. And for others, this they cannot observe. So this is important to recognize, because there certainly are those who are very skilled on putting on a show, on acting in a particular way, and they can be convincing. So we'd say they can talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. The only witness that really can tell is someone being honest with themselves, looking within their mind. Hence, it is the self-witness that is of primary importance.
Rangi Pangbo Zo Yimba Jesse the Garrison, 소수기 냠는 나는 소수기 냠는 지 소소야 삼문 나라 가르고 냠는 가르요메디 소수기 하고 그러와 미 소수기다 삼다이데 소수기 냠는 여바다 하고 그래 제사 랑기디 삼다제 도수 냠는 야 두중와디 소수 하고 와디다 예치쇼디레스 제사 소수기다 디니기 오당이 직제제바디 이제 야고 주문이 네 너를 중샤 디니 야고 주문을 선배 선반다 소수기 하고 그러와 소수기 냠는 지 야고 가르가르 주문 소수기 길라 냠는 나데 소수기 초와 가르고 소수기 하고 그러와 제사 소수 하고 해디다 예치쇼레스 디 조레스 그러다
Just to say as an aside, one of the words translated as practice literally means to gain experience. So I'll use the two translations for the same word here. So it's only you yourself that knows what experience you have gained of the Dharma, what effect your practice has had. So therefore, for one's mind to change, you have to come to know yourself, then look out for the obstacles, the afflictions to transformation. Because it's only you who can see them. It's only you can see their subtle influences, their deceptive displays. So therefore, of the two witnesses, the foremost one is the self-witness. Because it's only you yourself that can see what experience you have gained of the Dharma.
나도 나라 가르스모라서 나가는 저기 태바침비 로종 냠는 제지 소소한 냠는 제야도 소소의 삼나라야 시신 베네셈 아니 지 잡아다 제비 냠는 그디나 모두 유지용도 봐 제비 심여 봐 아니 준 현래 제비 삼바도 네비 삼바 직도 시기매 선배 삼다도 셈 시와시되다 아 저기 가서래 현래 제바다 잠비 삼다도 세외 삼바다 네외 삼바데 마시며요 말와 진짜 잠지 삼바데 시와제 되네 시신 두와라면도 현래 지게 랑게 셈 현래 요모 쇼소 파트 땅에데 파 송제 소 랑게 셈 아니 계획 쇼소 삼다도예요 맞잖아 두와세 저로 두와세 제사다 랑게 셈 냠는 되네시 고고래 제사다 잠니지 삼동야 아니 지게 현래 차와 봐야 아니 지게 되네게 기신 슈바나시 샹강의 차와 통도 안델이야 남사 안지기 인시세미 인시기 토야다 샹기 라야 녀바다 강가의 중에 남사 안델이야 안수버 검토바 안지코라 제게 되니게 녀바기에 대한 그런 레다 녀모베 샤와도 소와를 닝제 선배 인시 검야다 되니게 삼는 다투에나 다심 시신 두와디 유용고레스 지산 데니스 고고래 대바치면 년년 제백에 최년년 제백에 디고고래 데니스 고고래 데니게 셈 슈어 슈바 용바이나 근데 령의 쥐어바된 시신도 하셔야 판바 자와마도 체백에 데니게 시신 셈 류도와 근데 신가 두와된 거래서 나도와 제 나요거는 샤라 녀바다 체 지수라서 미줘봐 류도와서 류유거네 샤레 뇌베 자와마 제바디 디류용 거래 제사다 류도와 용마야디 셈도하면 디레 제사다 셈 시신 도와디 당은 태바침에 취냐면 제백이 셈리아 잠니 조금 투야다 한시야야 한 펜베 삼라 다토야 한 수수기 강아 제여도 되니 제여도 양산 남사 한 동아 다랭이 세바고미야라서 바다 녀발에 지면이 세바고미 냠네 제도가 고고레스 되니 제도가 있나 내 령의 쥐어바된 시신도 아주 용 거래 되네여자 다랑게 방법이 조어제 현기 다변에 어디미 야고도 냠네 야고 지기도 선배게 제수 일하지야다 랑이나 어디는 냠네 야고지 야고 주 선배 소소랑이나 소소랑을 제수 일하지 가지고 용 거래 제사다 되는지 고고래서 요거래서 방법이 조어제서
To summarize the meaning of this second point is that as a meditator, one needs to be transforming one's own mind. Therefore, one's own mind is the primary object of one's focus. Therefore, the measure of whether oneself has trained one's mind or not, or the extent to which one has trained one's mind or not, will be known to oneself. So you yourself will know, when engaging in formal practice, how easily one generates the virtuous minds of, say, love, compassion, as well as wisdom. And also you'll know how, as you're going about your activities, those minds impact the way you experience what arises to your mind. So you yourself will be a witness to whether your mind is becoming subdued, and how much of an impact the afflictions have, how easily they arise, how quickly they take hold, and whether one can even recognize them, let alone dispel them. So this is something that each individual practitioner needs to be skilled in knowing. So both how afflicted the mind is and how virtuous the mind is. And then you'll also see, when you're engaging with others, when you're out and about in society, how your mind responds to the various delights that arise to the mind, as well as the unpleasant encounters one has. For example, when meeting someone who acts towards you in an abrasive manner, whether naturally love and compassion arises for this person, knowing that they are merely expressing their inner pain, or whether one needs to generate that in a contrived manner, intentionally, or whether one doesn't at all and only later recalls. So in this way, you see how subdued your mind is. You see the level of transformation one has thus far attained. And then what others will experience, so that would be the self-witness, what others will experience from you is the expressions of your mind. And what they experience is not reliable. You need to have the honest look within. From this, you also recognize that what others say about you has not so much, is nothing to particularly rely on. But they here will experience your subdued mind. And if your mind is only slightly subdued, partially subdued, greatly subdued, they will gain an experience of that subdued mind. For example, so the subdued mind means it's been subdued by the trainings of the Dharma, which means it's not responding to the afflictions. This is a subdued mind. Attachment, anger, and so forth are not arising and dominating the mind. So therefore, this will have an impact on one's speech and one's conduct. For example, in terms of speech, one's not going to readily criticize others, complain about others, denigrate others. This will not occur to oneself, or, depending on how much the mind is subdued, it may occur, but you'll feel uncomfortable expressing it, won't feel natural anymore. Or, if you're less subdued than that, you will discipline yourself. With self-discipline, I will not express it, but the wish to is there. But nevertheless, you are restraining yourself. So there are degrees here of restraint, which you yourself will recognize, will know about yourself. Others will experience the result of that. And thereby, in your engagement with others, they will enjoy being in your company. In this way, your training of the Dharma has a positive impact on others. They will feel safe in your company. They will not feel any threat in terms of judgment, criticism, needing to be on eggshells in your company, and so forth. People will enjoy being with you. They'll feel a radiance of your warmth and your tenderness.
Rabjung Rabduchua, Domada, Domosunga Inda, Mayan Chige Kalihaurua, Pena Jigi got Domat Shortican, Ne Java, Jase Gwendican, and Ne Chige Gimen or Yumdu Chiti, Bo Chitiga, Giovina, Mazupatana, Miditana, or that Jase Gwen, Ungo, Shiriche, and Pa Javaruchik, Rabjung Tongo, the Chi Namgurtin, Tongo, Della, and then Rabjung Rayaba, Domosungo, Mare, or Jimmy, you are the Boo, but the child, you are the Denegate, that Denegate, Nesu, then a young Yoruba, and some tire you, but they Tongo, but in it. Says that, so Chi in the Mutana, or that Rabjungeta, then the chicken rose Tongo, in a Della Rabjurayamare. Says that I'm Jitin Bigidi, Yawama machine do, or that Java to get coach rub, Jinigi Rabju in Baruchi, or that Java to give a chicken. I did it. 개면님도 저거도 부치기도 보면님도 자와지기도 잡아지기도 쓰래. 그 둘로 건데마다 잡아래요 말다. 당연 저기 뒤에 마셔주고 잡아 임바시야라지. 어다 잡아지기 지기도 세. 제사다 치기 근데 단 둘로기 텔레티네 잡아래랍나. 지난 잡아 돈나 잡아래요 말와. 되네 돈에 안에 잡이기 되지기도 세. 견주셔나 아주 지금 말와. 돈나 지로. 되네 용거로 와다.
So the outer witness, from the external perspective, one cannot really tell the quality of the practitioner. It's all too easy to make a mistake. For example, you see someone wearing the robes of the ordained, immediately the presumption will come, this is a monk or a nun. And if you then see that monk or nun walking with someone of the opposite sex and a child, then you think, be a little confused. And then if you come to recognize from the behavior, the ordained person and the non-ordained person clearly are a couple, you'll be very confused. But they may not be acting in that way, and you'll just think these same people are walking together. So in other words, merely from someone wearing robes, the normal presumption will be this is an ordained person. And one would like to think in most circumstances, one would be correct. But one cannot be 100% certain, because there certainly are, and I'm aware of this, people who wear robes, but are actually married, have children. So these things do exist in the world. So one will look at a married ordained person living with their partner, and in one set of circumstances think an ordained person. But actually this person is not. So therefore, what appears to our mind is not entirely reliable. And certainly to judge how accomplished someone is, what the quality of practitioner, this is not really something one can do in a reliable way from the outside.
지당을 저기 최제 잠니제 자주 셈고미하다 동반이 권념내제 최제 바라 이미지 랍주인 거 말 김비 된지 더래 최제 그 지발에 이거 지발만 전전마도 랍주리요 바다 김발 매바 말에 다 랍주리요 바지 김발 매바이나 최제게 된다라 언디 된다라 지유 세바지 남난지 초 나야 유리 바로 랍중 된의 최제요 바지 김비 된의 제 매바이나 당하라 좀 말했대 자세 권지 제발 등아 최제가 된다를 지기스 나야 저러 와다. 네 거세. 가시게 돈벌로 잡을로 버이네. 자시리 제 자바 잡중 두로 잡아나 잡중 나신지 되고 와다. 제사디 지고 말해제. 니 제과요 말해. 제사들 소속에 잠니죠 거미하다 동반이 거미 최제디 김배진의 최제야 여러 와제. 인지미지 잡중 두로 건가요 말와. 김비 레제 매바지 인지미지 되니 최제발라 되니 둘로 공구여 봐나 당한 최념레제 잠니제의 전주심 념레제의 디된다 공구여랍나 라베야 지어로 봐다 제사디 디마르와 제사다 잠니죠 거미야다 전주심 동방인도 비셔라고 최념레제바디 김비텔라제여 인지미지 되니 랍중 둘로디 공가요 말와다 예반자다 제사다 소수의 랍중 멤버이네 랍중게 체고에 얘네 지게 치료단 배랍주 나신 둘로디게 동아대 되니 시작하고야단 고리를 직접하다 차상지 랍주는 이제 그 되니 예민티 부고냐 대체베네 가르치고르스네 상기 가르치고 말다 가지래 돈다라 상기기 되니게 둘로고야디 랍도 중화라비 아니 김비에 따봉와 랍중게 따래 랍도 중화다 김비게 다 예와체 송거와 지산디 송제 디 아니 인디기 가르용 거래서네 그런기 상기 깔라 마시바디 차고래 상기 깔 지고 말해서 차고래 아니 미션다 때문에 제가 디니 제가 소수기 줘봐 디니 천데 미션다게 남서 오더 잡아디기 디니 지고 잡아디니 쇼슨 카타이도 미딜야 디버사주 거로 그래서 미 잡아 되는 지기도 세대 지용을 잡아 지용을야 견주지에도 걸 디버만 보사고래 제가 디네자 디 너를 셈보래 제가 디네 시간이 되게
bearing in mind how one cannot really make judgments or reliable judgments from the outside, it's really much better to let go of that judgmental mind. But as far as oneself goes, here it's important to be honest with yourself, but also present yourself in an honest way, not trying to present yourself as something that you aspire to be, but are not. And this is important because there are people who present themselves in a particular way that is not in accordance with their mental accomplishment, and this causes some confusion. And through this confusion that it causes in others' minds, non-virtue can be created. So, for example, an ex-ordained person may still want to be perceived by others as being a practitioner of the Dharma. So therefore, perhaps at all times or certain times, they'll wear the robes of the ordained, they'll keep their hair short, and they will look like an ordained person. To anyone who doesn't know they have disrobed, they will think they are still ordained. And so they'll present themselves in this way. But they almost certainly, though, by this point will have a partner, maybe even children. And now they're presenting themselves in one way that is not in accordance with how they are, in that the vows of the ordained are not on their continuum. And this person, as an ex-ordained person, will certainly know that when one goes through the process of ordaining, the very beginning of the process, one makes the commitment to, amongst other things, abandon the signs of the non-ordained or the laity and adopt the signs of the ordained. Now you have a person who's non-ordained but wearing the signs of the ordained. This is contrary to what the Buddha said. So here you have a person wanting to look like a practitioner of the Buddha Dharma, but intentionally acting in a way that's contrary to the Buddha Dharma, to the teachings of the Buddha. So for themselves, as a practitioner, they're not being honest with themselves. But moreover, they are acting in a way that will cause confusion for others, and from this, criticism will come. And criticism from others, either about them or about ordained people, because of confusion created, and therefore others end up accumulating non-virtue based on your own behavior. So this really should be avoided. Rather, one should be honest with oneself and honest in how one presents oneself.
Yeah, Bendigo Guaya, Geshe membership, Geshe Thubten Rabten, or what the Thubten Rabten, partner, do Chekawa, Bendigo Guru. Just Bendigo Gumba, or that go Geshe Chekawa, and the other Chekawa, or the Thubten Chekawa, Tondy, to go Chekawa, other go Java, go Geshe Chekawa, the other Chekawa. Just the go Geshe going to me to say the Guaya, to Lord Geshe, so she gets a when they made how quiet, which how quiet the Chamber. Just do which come for Tony, when they remember do which go, you know what I should go Shalamna, Data Chekawa. And then it's a dinner that is a she twaggy, so Maria said. She's under she twaggy, the Jashe member, when it's Jashe singing Masawa, she do which come with all Jashe Quensha, go down Maria to go Jashe Quenshas. The Jashe when they do see to Lamna, the Data Chekawa. I think I want you to not show for it. Dine and Jeza Dine and Zang, Anjugi, Ganchele, Denigi, Tong and Lamsa, and Sosu Lamsa, Gunji, Machevache, and those are some Nalia, Shimbuche, the Ganina, the great degree, the Tashawan Tata in Mina, some data, or the Tashawan to Kotabe, Chitine, Yam the two, the Kotabe in Amina, Dobo said, Shimbuche, Gala, they won't net. Gender didn't Shimbuche, Yawa, how were Ratriba Jumba, and did I do this in the Shendu. The Chesa one me told or the Resha demon, Nidisha said, Sheveneda, Digoma, Chesada, me tongue in it, 안두시네 남바 통진 디리에서야디 남사데 방보데다 방보 템부라 말해서 또 말해서 지사심 냠용의 톤도 심주지 제바자 하고나 안에 난게 섬기 톤에 제바자 하고는 딘 쇼디리에서 왔다.
And some still wanting to be perceived as a practitioner of the Dharma, despite having disrobed, they may try and justify it to themselves, well, I'm not actually wearing the robes of the ordained, but to those who were never ordained, they would look at what they're wearing and think, this must be an ordained person, because they're similar style, similar color, and so forth. So they are dressing maybe not in actual robes, but something that really looks the same. So why would they be doing this? So this is something they will answer for themselves, and they will have an answer for sure. But when we look at in the context of what's being discussed here, we need to be honest with ourselves, see where our motivation is influenced, is tainted by the afflictions. Because one may well not be setting out, I'm going to deceive others, I'm going to advantage myself. But this kind of deceptive behavior, motivation is there, wanting to be seen in a particular way and so forth. So here one needs to be honest with oneself. And as part of this means being honest in how you display yourself, present yourself. And the fault of not doing so is that you yourself are acting in a way that is that's hindering the abandonment or the afflictions. And secondly, in relation to how others perceive you, it is likely to cause not only confusion, but will certainly lead to confusion, but it may well lead to non-virtue. And this again is contrary to the having gained the measure of having trained one's mind.
Gabriel 가자 당 그거 첨부 유비 원기 단지 김비도로 건거라 이제 용거래 지사 김비도로 건거 용거로 봐 지사 되는 통에도 어다이코니마 지타를 다고 잡으러 센세 거디린 구두도 권된 샬람다 디한디고 말해 그래서 남사 너는 저기 치 두로래 통에 남사 어디래 샬람다 타주 셰신다 내디고 말 통해야 되네 통과할 때 지사 김비도로 거 통하도 안돼 김바 차세 잡으러서 돼 sometime 예로 거단지 통에 어디지 관심 가린다데 그거 가르치면 김자 가린다고 나시 심주 제자하고는 되는 바디다 디리라 되고 제가 되니기 가자던 괴비 원게 되니기 권고 용거데 되니기 차이도 남사 되니기 통에도 아데 디디디레샤서 타주지는 디디고 말해 제가 당 안지기 딱한 경우에 당부 통에도 남사랑을 나오는 어디단 디레서 타주 맞제바제 심주지 제바제 가래납니다. 제바제는 매번에서는 어디 디레서 디 말하셔서 제화디 계시 뭐래서 뭐.
What certainly also can happen is that someone who is ordained, who does have the vows of the ordained on their continuum, they, in certain circumstances, may well not wear robes. And then they're out in society, and they're wearing regular clothes, and someone sees them and knows this to be an ordained person, but now sees them in regular clothing. Independent on what arises to their mind, the visual appearance, as well as their intellectual understanding of what that means, they come to the judgment, oh, this person must have disrobed. Maybe they have, but one has come to a firm decision, a firm conclusion, without having actually analyzed. So this is a sign of a person taking what appears to their mind very seriously. Whereas if they were a bit lighter with the various appearances that come to their mind, they would have the mental space to inquire. Maybe ask, or maybe just say, maybe there's been change, maybe not, and go on about their day. So therefore, it comes down to a further point of how we relate to the appearances that come to our mind.
나디네 어디다 방법이 좋아지에서 방법이 방법다 랑이 방법이 디난에 좋어되다 랑기 어두시네 심주지 제바제 체명 예반예 바디다 계시쇼 좋어들이 해사지도 그래.
Summary then, in conclusion on the second point, with yourself, be honest. Look at yourself. Be very clear and act in a way or be true to yourself. Do not be deceptive with yourself or with others. And then likewise, in relation to, those 2 points. Be honest with yourself and be honest with how you present yourself.
Gabriel chi nangsu dang an denda la mitun ba yong sigire se de dine za da ma de geshe lamsa an ji ya wo ton ba ya wo do su de nga ta lo de ma de to be du ja re sha sin dine gi me de da cho chu che be na ne ji go ma de ji che sa dine lamsa chi lu nga yu je ba da che lu la so ba tong de di ka ri na me na ka de re sim ju che an du sin that go dohwa che ta ma che dohwa che dine to ne an so su gi sim ju che nge ba nye ba che de geshe yes 지금 당번에다 통연의 남사 윤제시야 라서 받아 남사 저 야 버리셔서 다 주셔 봐대 디한 자고 말이스 지사다 예침버리스 또 디난데다 소수기 심주지 제바지 하고 거에도 예침버리스 그거로.
So in relation to oneself as a witness, there be honest with yourself about where you are and be honest with how you present yourself. Then in relation to yourself being a witness to others, there, do not take what appears to your mind as true. Because this is what we do. The phenomena appear to the mind, and we believe them to be true. This is taking the appearance of true existence. This is what we need to train to let go of. What appears to one's mind, do not delay in grasping at it as true, or where one grasps at as it is true, try not to believe that grasping too much. Because it's through grasping at the appearances as true, we get drawn to them with attachment, repulsed from them with aversion. This is how the afflictions play. So if we train ourselves not to grasp too strongly and at what appears to our mind as true, our mind will start to subdue. The afflictions will weaken. So this then is further how we should train. So I had forgotten, and then when Genna started talking, I remembered just the last bit. Because by not training in this way, we'll continue as we are now, through taking the appearances as true, and then being drawn to what attracts us, repulsed from what we dislike, and from this, we criticize, we complain, we wag our finger. So this is why we need to abandon this way of thinking. The third, maybe there's a two together, let's see. Continuously maintain solely a joyful outlook. One is trained if this can be done even when distracted.
sem anechika yi midewa maimba kikyo mares dene yi midewa majiwa che an sem dilya sem shide an slele ba chabo shide ba chile ne to ba che an dene kabla da garsong sene kinya namdo gyurto ba dene ki da yonde da ne na sa ta dene ki joyi kanga dene te de kabla sem majiwa majiba che o da dene sem ne ba le che dene 가서래 데니기 주야되다 규단기 냐마 량암베 사베 기 규단기 되고 민거래 선비게 삼다 데니신 뇌설라서 주마이네 안디니게 제바데 오다 신윤여바다 데니쇼바다 닝제다 혼존이 뭐베 샤워도 소바래 닝제 선비게 단 닝제 거면 다 데니게 수베 냠네 도체바이나 제사다 이 소수이 이데 이셈 대화 니 가와디 마추바제 파 시대가도 균도 네토바제 중바이나 내내 소수기 냠렌집이 고쳐봐야지 오다 제산데 내게 이대 바시 균도 댄스 되네 모두 유제 되네게 딱 경험 바제 간을 채위네야 될이야 셈 마추바이 네셈 이 마추바제 이 미대와 매겨 이 미대와 매겨도 컨트롤하야다 딜링거 말봐 제산 컨트롤 말하다 이 미대와 매겨 셈 이 대나나 되네 되네 디가래야 네 수변냠는다 네 제가 잠니제냠네 레규들의 이체벽에 이체 되네기 삼라당 두바이나 다 이대바시 균도 댄스 되네 된 균도 되네기 냠네 제두바이나 지고고어레스 되네 제두바이나 되네가 잡아친 별로 좀 냠랭기 다 고야고 중국에 따라서 우리와다 균도 댄스
Continuously maintain solely a joyful outlook. This then is a sign of having, or a measure of having trained the mind that when one meets adverse circumstances, one readily, spontaneously transforms them into the path to enlightenment. So whether this adverse circumstance comes from the material world, such as physical illness, or unpleasant material circumstances in one's environment, or from meeting someone who acts or talks in an unskillful way towards you, or you observe this, if you are able, your mind stays stable, peaceful, joyful. And from this, compassion, love, wisdom for this being arises. This is an excellent sign of one having trained the mind. So hopefully it's clear from how it's being said that it's not a disinterest where you don't care what others get up to, but rather that compassion or love or wisdom arises in relation to their harmful behavior. And that this comes about not sporadically, but continuously, or could be translated as stably. That this becomes who you are. Because right now, for most people, their natural response isn't a joyful outlook. This is, just as an aside, what came up a lot in Shantideva's teachings. The preceding cause to anger is the discontent mind or the unhappy mind. So that's the opposite here of what I've translated as a joyful mind. So if one's normal response is to get a bit annoyed, frustrated, agitated by what one encounters, this is a sign, a measure of not having trained one's mind. But when one stably maintains a joyful, a happy a mind in the face of adversity, this is an excellent sign, of an excellent measure of having trained the mind.
어떻게 유의냠지 되게 삶마다 베갑라 심 샨다 당주 샨다 레가다 되는 직접 심 또시 양되베 갑라 되네 갑라야 난 로버도 난 지금 강아도 체 연구를 하다 로버도 강바다야 라서가 강바나서 다야 안 되네게 한다 로버도 심제 시행기 안내세 제발라서 받아 되네 연구를 봐 되네 요도 갑라 나 지버래다 삼단하데 대신 지버래 다 기념 로버도 되네게 체연도 갑라 and got some that to which go in it. Jeza, Dini TV Gablia, and the Jukanati Pa, Danglan Jedi, and the Jige, or that the Yawang Malay table, don't I do Guru Sajil, Devo, Chue, but was the guy of Marasim Besam Diana, and Dini, and Jige, or that Dini Gard or some Jin, Tinsepana, Korong and the Jikanga, Shenada, the Negi, Coral, Sim Magi, Ungal to Sigores and Beda Ninji, as a Ninja Comia. And it Palia, Nubi, some Jimma or Chamba, Zivi, some Yam, down to Wayne, Yang Tubna, the Nigi, so semi antivical, Lobo the King and Chi Ken Man Rangi, the Nigi King, turned to Slade, Lamsa, Delia, Subi, Yam Jada, Tajula Jamni, Yamiko, Comtuba, the Nigi, and Sim Shenana, Yumo, or the Masoji, Duchin, near Tubaina, and that it, the Tabachimbu, Lojongi, Yamin Jebigi, Teddy. 냠는 야고 중에 따라서 그러다 로종이 세례서 그러다네. Shumna Shiva Lamna Digre Shiva Lamna Tambo de la Yi de Bashi Kundu so that Chidan Ganga Dine Chili Kablasam Dare. The order Yang Gas the Tenigi that Chidan do Siki to some Mata Vikablasum do Snami Vikat Lobo to Juna, Gange the Yigas had the Chidan Tunga the Chidan said. The order Yang Gas the Nigga Semna you got Lobo to Dine Chubaina, then the session. Dandara. Go over to Juana Gajele, Chile, Dusin, Sungore. And then anybody Gajele, Sosuke Jamni, Jokomi Tuyada, Sylvian Tuete. A chick Jena, Niches, and Chabakaya.
Then Geshe says it doesn't matter. This fourth point can stay as a fourth point, or it can be included in the third point, but it seems to follow with the third. So the third was we continuously maintain solely a joyful outlook. And then if this can be done, even when distracted, one is trained. So this then means that, so the third point we could say is, in particular, one's mind is primarily on virtue. Because someone who, the measure of having trained the mind, one's mind is not going to be on non-virtue very often. So primarily you have virtuous thoughts dominant. And then when one encounters the unwanted, one's virtuous outlook, one's joyful outlook, one's happy mind is not lost. But there are times, the final point, when one's mind is not on virtue. So it's not on non-virtue, but let's say neutral things. You are engaging in various chores, and you're thinking about the stages that one needs to do this particular task. So it's not a virtuous mind. But then the unwanted is encountered. So the question then is, does one maintain one's joyful outlook even when distracted? So the difference would be, let's say one has been meditating on love, compassion, or wisdom, and then one is going about your activities and that mind is dominant. Then, this is the third point, it's much easier, expected almost for a skilled practitioner to maintain their joyful outlook. But when they are not, when the practitioner, their mind is not necessarily on what they were meditating, was not on what they're meditating on, but is rather on, let's say, an activity, a task. And then they meet the unwanted, or they're separated from the unwanted. So these normal sources of suffering that trigger afflictions. If then too, the natural response, the spontaneous response is compassion for others, love for others, or the arisal of wisdom, then one's mind has been trained.
Disha da du sine songre, disha da nganzo denda nyingbo tsu du shene da jig shushawei na dinere da nganzo ge teba chenbe ge jam ni ji gom che ani simje tamji ge dunda sanyo ko ban tobar sho sibe jenju sem du sin yamlen che che chema mayin ba ji gyule ke saba na jenju sim ngone de ke war ba da jesa jenju sim ngone ke yo du di ane jenju sim ki we dunda jam ni ji gom che tebu di drutarwada drubarwa jamniji kene ni gebi tebu nije chim gebi gomba tebu janjusim de gyula gewaza dadi janjusim gebi de jamniji lo jongwe ge danda de drubare che de dad lo jongwe che di chagore dene 동번이 le jeba che che ne ande chimju che nyamlen che lo jong du sin samda jang dene ganzam jile ni 동번이 de mo chimeng ba ni de de 동번이 lo jongwe ge che di 제 차고를. 그 동반이도 동반이로 로장외 체리가서는 심주제 제바 제제 동반이도 비로디 규례 제바나 인로정외기 된다 주어를 받아 체 다다 차는. 다 전주심계에 된다 전주심계에 점니주 공제 전주심 심제 탐산주고 봐 토벌쇼스면 삼바 주만만이 버치 규례 제바이나 전주심원에 제부 주계와라. 전주심 냠네 제비기 된다 주죠 받아 체리 로주베 세차고 다되네 장주sem나 장주 공론 장주sem나 근데 동반이도 로군에 라제 개념을 가르쳐베네 제도여베네다 개발침을 로주에 냠는 체 다바차고래 좀 되어라 쉬시한테네.
The measure of having trained the mind comes up in many contexts, as so that the practitioner can understand, can recognize their training, the success of their training or not. In that, we saw in the second point, the primary witness, the foremost witness, really is oneself. So further measures in terms of the Mahayana Dharma in relation as to whether one is a bodhisattva or not comes about first in the preparatory stages, in the lead up to actually becoming a bodhisattva, generating bodhicitta. One will be meditating in the way advised, regularly giving rise to the mind of love. May all beings abide in lasting, stable happiness. And the mind of compassion, may they be freed of suffering. So this will arise regularly within oneself. And it will have a profound impact on one's mind, on oneself. And also one will be generating the wholehearted resolve, I take it as my responsibility. And then sometimes even bodhicitta will come. One will generate bodhicitta, this honest, sincere determination, I will become a Buddha for the sake of others, and thereby lead them all to enlightenment. And this will have a transformative impact on oneself. But it is generated in meditation, intentionally. It's when one is so familiarized to that generation of bodhicitta that it arises spontaneously or uncontrived, that one has bodhicitta, when one is a bodhisattva. So the mark or the measure of whether one has generated, whether one is a bodhisattva or not, is when one's bodhicitta is uncontrived. Thereafter, one commits to, under the influence of this mind. Thereafter, under the influence of this mind, one commits to striving in the various practices of a bodhisattva in order to fulfill this goal. But the mark of being a bodhisattva is uncontrived bodhicitta. Again, this word uncontrived means you aren't intentionally generating it. So it is going to be always present for you. And for the wisdom realizing emptiness, there it's when your realization of emptiness is attained. Then this would be the measure of realizing emptiness. Here there are many stages too, but when one can be said to have a realization of emptiness is when one has had a lasting, transformative realization of emptiness, and when, maybe not as a singular, when one has realizations of emptiness that are lasting, then one can say that one has a realization of emptiness. So again, having a meditative experience doesn't necessarily mean that much. It doesn't mean one has gained a measure of having attained something, but is more likely to be one of the many steps required on that journey to actually gaining, say, the realization of bodhicitta.
꼴로게 계획선배 토네 benengan jige domjunde jigya konjolya lama dan konjolya 최고 필요 선배다 되게 지 lama dan konjuge 대바 je 되네 대바기네 다 lama로 최고 필요 선배도 프리비 선배 꼴로 토네 안 꼴로 되니스 토네 시에스당바이나 샤브르 타베네 샤브르 타다 시에다데 개와차사 류이 개와차고 그래서 꼴로 계획선배 꼴이라지 부여로 가지고 진짜 개와차고 나디네 공원이야 아니 미샤상 고세다 아니지 소소게 아니지게 엉이시에 야고 다네 야보도세 미 뚱아래 섬다지 안시에스다 바샤브르 타와이나 오코샤브르 야고 빼야고도다 셈비게 아코시 님바슈 빼야고도세비 미 뚱아래 다 되니게 섬다 제제바이나 지에 답에 나다 안데 제샤로 타오시는데 디니데 안데 개와 차요 말에 제 디꾸는 마사 디샤로 제가 디니자 안소디 나셈을 하리고 제가 디니자 낭추위 토네 냠네 최시리 삼로 네 마견다 삼로 노와다 디파 지 심주체제 디파 최럽디 삼로 안바다 마릭바디 파 매어 쇠진 디수 유진 상보다 야고 개위 쳐려야 상부이 토를 유셔야지 삼로 상보 양은 현재 판별 삼로디 유로인자 최시는 소교다서 고고 제가 되는 삼로디 멤비릭디 파 매봐서 빵 되는 셈 상부이 개위리 현재 판별이 라실의 판별 삼로디 뭐 공부도 따와는데 최냐면 제가 봤을 때 최세대 되는 고고 제가 지상한지做 similar 라리고 제자당 언제 나비게 시도다 언제게 치 튼게다 강아 가르쳐외네 또 similar 되는 용거래서 제자 되네자 그렇게 용거 제자 레다 레알 되는 용거래서 제자 레세디 셈게 되네 사비 유들라 민 레스다고래 유다던다 유제 아주게 사번 유레 되는 제부 계세나지 셈게 되네 다 대도 용의 유사야 저로와 이 셈기때는 자유들이 레라고 그러거든. 제가 되니 너나디 되니 자다가 저기 셈기도 안에 또 쉐되다 미토에 매바다 남사 지소식도 삼는 땅에 하고는 마도 미토에 달라버려 내려와. 그래서 진시도 에 띵한 저기 강가에 저서 하러와니 아메지알이야. 그래서
I want to reiterate something that I've mentioned this in our time together in this retreat, which is that the meaning of a Buddhist practice is to train one's mind. Practicing the Buddha Dharma means, or to use the synonym, the literal word for practice here, practicing Buddha Dharma, gaining experience of the Buddha Dharma. So this, where one gains experience, is not through one's speech or physical behavior, but it's mind. In one's mind, one is experiencing the Buddha Dharma. This means you are practicing. When that experience is stable, then you know those qualities of the Dharma are rising within you in a way that is transforming you. So the way we interact with others is as an expression of our mind. The way we speak to them, the way we physically engage with and around others is an expression of our mind. If our mind is subdued by the qualities of the Dharma, our way of speaking, our way of acting will be impacted. Moreover, whether what we are doing or saying or thinking is virtuous or not, it doesn't so much depend on the physical verbal activity, but on the motivating mind. For example, if someone is asked to give an offering of a song or dance to the Lama, and they train and they put on the performance, whether this is virtuous or not depends on the attitude. How virtuous or not entirely depends on the attitude. So one would assume someone asked to offer a song or offer dance will be someone, that person being asked will be someone who has faith in the Lama. If they have no faith in that person, then it's not likely to be virtuous and maybe just neutral. But how much virtue is created really is entirely dependent on the quality of their motivation. If they are doing entirely with the motivation as an offering, it's an excellent accumulation of virtue. But if, to the extent their motivation is tainted by what others will say, what others are thinking about this, am I going to be praised, am I going to be criticized? To the extent that that ordinary way of thinking, mundane way of thinking is present, the quality of virtue, the amount of virtue is impeded. So the point here is the mind is the mind is what we train. It's the mind that determines on whether something is virtuous or not. And in terms then of virtuous karma or non-virtuous karma, this depends on the mind. So whether karma is accumulated or not depends on the mind. And if karma is accumulated, whether it's virtuous or not, depends on whether the mind is virtuous or not. So therefore, and then thirdly, the karmic imprint is also placed on the mind. So the mind has a central role in terms of karma. Again, whether we are accumulating karma or not depends on the mind. Whether it's virtuous or not depends on the mind. And then it is the karmic imprint, virtuous or non-virtuous, is placed on the mind. Hence the great need to transform our mind. And as one does so ever more, so that one really is gaining experience, through one's practice is leading to experience in one's mind, and that experience is starting to become more stable, and that the stability of that experience is arising spontaneously, you will experience that inner transformation. You will recognize, I'm not the same person as I was before. You will be the first to recognize this change. Slowly, others too, especially those who've known you for a while, will see this change, and they will recognize consistently the way you're acting, the way you're speaking is not like it was before. And in this way, they become the outer witness. You will have already been the inner witness. And this is how, through gaining experience of the Dharma, your very personality changes. You become ever more of a subdued person, a person who's on the side of virtues, a wholesome person. Your way of being is virtuous, is wholesome. And other ways of acting and speaking that maybe you engaged in the past, this will feel alien to you. It will not feel like a natural expression of who you are anymore. And these too are further signs of the Dharma arising within.
Dine za dangan jige jue du xin de yamne jie de samdai de jesa mi gi thoa me ba za an jige on jumje tyenba ro xie da ji ha gu du wo ma de jesa ma tong de da me ba za yin de da le yang du xin de yamne ji ki xin gyang zu din ma ng zu du xin chu xie jie da de ya da gyang zu yamne jie ge wa sam da ba de ge wa pen ma si ge qin bo sa yo de jesa sa yo ng zu gi mi tong go ma ma do thoa ye su zhu jue ba pen ma se mo sa sa yo. Sapemasi dini chayo, jesa dini za dini ki samlo dushine, Gabriel yang zo oda chik chida samlo nala ata chik chora kalya khagda ti Gabriel yang zo tujo ro ata ti yawo chi minu da chema che minu sambe ki pha sha sha ji samju cha sha sha ji samlo nala yungdu wa dini za da Gabriel gidi nang zo khowa ben za gidi na yawo yong tuye kalya khawore Gabriel no risho Gabriel ya anji nyamle yawo je ma da yungure ine da simji chayo ma gang je wa be yawo ni mudu ni jigin sembe samda de ma de ge chen ma cha go jesa dini ki Gabriel ya sem ma ji wa da bu su go ra cha de anji le le che de pa di ko sam ma da le le che sha je de on ji so so ra ya ji du wa ani ji ge bang ye sa da me do ye sa da chu sa da dini ki de sem gu ya che la du che de be ge chen ma cha go re jesa dini ki Gabriel ng zo nyam de Gabriel no risho ata di mi jien de da ji no risho so ya si no risho da di chome do sembe din sha sha ye gi nyanga yo di samda gyo ma 근데 어데 Gabriel no risho gre ga ya mas ni ngi de mudu chi gi se chemane ya go chi gi sembe samda de be mas ge chi mo je sa da ng zo yam namid adirin je ma san ye je da le ga ma mo je tu dang de ji gi me sembe zam샤샤 di jawa ma ji da oda di le ga de ne tu da cha son mo ba ji cha son de di chi gi sembe ge samda de ma de zun yu se chu yu xin dian ba xiao se chu yu xin chu sin ma yong ge ne ko zai ma gi di ma du xiao de ge ro ba ji de chu yu na xin ji ma de zun yu sam na ni ge yen de chi gi sembe sam de zun yu chu yu na xin ji go go le se mu di wo de ne za de mu di ji jie de ra go de se de ne ge samda de 예침벌 가브레가블 양어주 셈 냠nen지리 가블 디네 기회는 셈 부스토 아데 되나 루야면 되시냐면 또베 직도가 기에면 셈베 삼다네 안디 다디 제메지면 셈베 셈주 차지 안 샤야다 디네게 냥아 침벌 돼서 네 도시기가 말랑 도시네 안 모디네 지기 스타데 가브레가블 강아 용을 너주 용을 가요 말서 배 삼다 모르다 제가 동안 나도 리베 세바시야 강아 체스노 오데 가요 맞지 파충충 삼다지 이마데와 맞죠 충충 삼다지 이미데와 이거 말해 디 노트 첨보에서는 심마기와 마마 차기래 디는 마기와 차는 야고요 말해
Time thus far together, you've heard about many practices that one needs to engage in to train one's mind. So it's all too easy to hear these preliminaries, then there are these main practices, and then on how to be patient in adverse circumstances and so forth. And now I hear that there are these 5 things I'm supposed to do when I go to sleep and prepare for my death. It really can sound quite daunting. And if it does sound daunting, personally, I think it's quite understandable. But as we saw in the 4th point, this is about a lifetime of practice. And the reality is it is about a continuity of lifetimes. What you are hearing here, even if it's for the very first time, it will not be your first time. These imprints you would have gathered in lives previous. Hence you are here. Hence you are drawn to this. So I'm saying this for you to take to heart that I say with confidence, there's nothing in here that is beyond anyone here. The accumulation of virtue is something everyone can do. Why? Why can I say this with confidence? Because you're already doing it. Merely in our time together, by hearing these teachings, if your mind is engaging with a positive, virtuous mind in the teachings, you're accumulating merit. Why? Because your mind are these wholesome, virtuous minds of the Dharma, accumulating merit. In the meditations and other activities you are doing, following those, you're accumulating merit. There we go. It's something you can all do. And likewise, not just in formal Buddhist and Dharma settings, but whenever one is generating virtuous minds, one is accumulating merit. Because merit or virtue means one's mind is virtuous and thereby one is creating these virtuous imprints, karmic imprints. So therefore, don't feel that any of these qualities are beyond you. All of these can be achieved. So in life, in society, in life, things that are valued usually require quite some effort to either save up a lot to buy or a constant study and training to develop a particular skill. So too with the qualities of mind. These require constant effort over a protracted period, and then change will come. This process isn't quick and it isn't easy, but it is entirely achievable. So on one hand, be very aware that this precious human rebirth is this consciousness that has arisen in this life as a precious human rebirth has come from a life before, and a life before, and will continue in lives to come. This means we have this continuity of consciousness with a wide variety of karmic imprints. So we have these habitual tendencies. We see the world like this, we are drawn to this, repulsed by that. These are the imprints we bring in. So this is what we are, the non-virtuous ones, that we are trying to turn around, and the virtuous ones we are trying to build on. This is the process that we each individually are engaged in. Seeing it like that should make the mind spacious, recognizing this is an ongoing process. I'm continuing what I've done before, in this life, in lives previous, and will continue in lives to come. I'm building on my good habits and thereby breaking my unhelpful, my unwholesome habitual tendencies. This is the process. So I'm saying all this to counteract certain ways of thinking which greatly impede the fulfillment of each person's potential. Feeling that I'm not good enough, feeling that it's too hard for me. This is nonsense. If you have a precious human rebirth, you are good enough. If you have a precious human rebirth, it is not beyond you. This I can say with confidence. So I encourage you to recognize this quality within you. so that you accept yourself for who you are. We say in English, warts and all, accept yourself. This really is important. Mistakes will be made. You may be trying to develop love and compassion, and then you're angry again. It's okay. Accept yourself. This is really important. And the companion to that is accept others for who they are. The mind of judgment, criticism, self-criticism, criticism of others, this is not at all helpful. Be honest and accepting of who you are and of who others are. All of that is okay. There's no need to judge or to criticize. And a further point to emphasize is the way to change one's mind is through applying this indispensable quality of enthusiasm. It's most commonly translated as effort, but think of it as enthusiasm, of a delight in engaging in this process. It has the quality of the other translations of the same word, of effort, of diligence. But it's the emphasis, trying to match language here, the emphasis is on the joy we take and a continuity. The visual imagery that is used is our Dharma practice needs to be like a flowing river, constantly moving towards the great goal of enlightenment. So we need this joyous perseverance, this enthusiastic perseverance to ensure we are constantly moving in letting go of the afflictions, embracing the minds of virtue. And when we come across a log in the river or a rock in the river, that's okay. There's an obstacle. We stumble, we move on. It's all right. We accept ourselves for who we are and continue trying to reduce this self-critical mind and the judgmental mind of others, towards others. In this way, be patient with yourself, be consistent in your training, and a final crucial point, to transform the mind has to be relaxed and spacious, not uptight. If one's uptight, that mind cannot grow and flourish. But like a broad, spacious, fast-flowing river, change will come. But you need to be spacious with yourself, and this embraces accepting yourself, and be spacious with others, accepting of others. This is indispensable too.
Venerable Lobsang Dorje kabla ani genje sungdwa ani kaprilia jikpe pechi chaya da nege lobjem nyobdo re sitevene ba pechi ma sha kibuche ana chamjam le gemja ro ana ni de shos ni andu sen de ni jinen den jelia ba jang shos ni kaprilia ju chora na ro ne ji zeba zhe de so so ji ma xin ji chaya de ani mi xia de de mi xia san yi de zeba zhe de konzo ya cha so so de ma xin wa ji chaya de sem joor de ji de genze le da nga xin de cha song da de ju ya genze ju ro ni ne 게디나 결혼 야가장 책임을 아니 당보장 책임을 차상 로정 지구는 건조 아니 당보 책임을 와 결혼 가빌 결혼 아니 당보 야가 책임을 가빌 건조 야가 책임을 마시 그 조사를 로제 용례서 되는 순구래 대수는 셈다 펜부도와 이런 아주 야 직배리 도지 님은 차와로와 차와지 직 차와지 되네 이후 배시 nhập 차야 되는 nhập 이후지 되네 배시 제가 신고 말 되네 대도의 긴가하고 오로와 긴이 되는 베지티에 잠자제네 좀식 빼기면 와야로 시시는 되는 게면 된서서라지 중부로 차로 되는 베지티에 대성원에 탑람다 뭐 저기 야오도와 되는게 제산 되는게 송도와 돼 대성원 저기 되는게 제산 강화 되는 체류 셈좀 맞아봐제 안 소식에 강화 될래야 직도 심듯 셈을해야 차이게도 봐서 되는 줘야다 되는 직도 사장사의 롱시고요서다 되네 메도여서 신나여서 파도 스타다 되네 제고를 쓰도 공제 현저한 참제가 지네 바 참도 공제 된수 된제 바라야 안치도 롱시고여서 리토스와 메도다 신나야고 신공부여서 봐 도시는 다시는更把它 라버티게 두수 육수 제고를 되네 공제한서 되네 랍전하는 되네 용도와
So in the segment that I've just concluded, what I've just said in these last few minutes, this really is advice on how to practice. So earlier today we looked at in the fourth point, a lifetime's practice. And now I've just really given you some key pointers in how to practice for your lifetime. And what I've just said in those various points, this is something I know from my own experience. Because when I was a younger monk in the monastery engaging in those 2 decades of intense study, all too often myself or my classmates, sometimes the mind would get a bit tight, a bit stressed. Why? Because it's you pushing. The program moves forward slowly, but it's continuous. And so sometimes we will become unbalanced, applying too much effort, meaning our mind became tight. Because it's the effort, or to use the alternative, the perseverance, the enthusiasm. This isn't the fault. The fault is the mind becoming tight because you're grasping too much. So then our skilled teacher would give the advice I've just shared with you. He would say to us, okay, I can see some of you a bit tense. So for you, you need to relax. And he would encourage us, those specific people would say, you after class, you go and have a nap. Or you take some time off and you go for a walk outside in nature. So this was in the days before anyone had electronic things, but now you would say, watch something on the phone and make you laugh. So the idea is to relax the mind so that you can re-engage. Similarly, he would say to us, because sometimes on the debate ground, we're debating and then we are humiliated. Something we should know, we don't know. Or we make a obvious logical step like a fool, and then we get humiliated and laughed at. And our teacher would say to us, you can't always be the best in the class. How can that be? There are hundreds of you here. Just do the best. Just see that you are each day trying. That is enough. Don't have to be the best. Just be the best that you can be. And this is fine. Take joy in yourself. So he'd encourage us in this way. And sometimes in teachings, when he saw a lot of heavy faces before him, then he would tell us stories. And tell us stories to make us laugh and to relax. And again, then he would encourage us. Now, don't rush back to your rooms and to your books. Take a long walk. Talk to your friends. Calm down. And luckily where our monastery was, like here, is in the natural environment that's very beautiful. So we could go for walks in nature. And being in nature, we all know this. It calms the mind. This is why yogins are drawn to natural environments, because it calms the mind. But that point, because everyone here lives in their own place, not necessarily out in the bush, the point is, by calming the mind, relaxing the mind, making it spacious, like it is in a natural environment, your meditation will bear fruits. And going about your activity, take your daily activities, you take this spacious mind, like when you're out in nature. Then your mind will flourish. You'll have positive impacts with others. And change will come to you. Then thank you. Then we can conclude there for today. Thank you.